This is the voice of Idaho agriculture. Each week, we bring you agriculture news and perspective. Stay tuned to this week's Idaho Farm Bureau's weekly podcast from the state capitol. Thanks for joining us. I'm Jake Putnam. A signing ceremony at the White House puts the finishing touch to the new U.S.-Japan trade agreement. Gary Crawford reports.
At the White House Monday, the signing of the U.S.-Japan trade agreement, what President Trump calls
a game changer for our farmers and our ranchers, providing them with significantly enhanced access to a critical foreign market.
At the signing ceremony, President Trump said under the agreement, Japan will expand access to many U.S. food and ag products.
And as a result, 126 million Japanese consumers will have greater access to high-quality American almonds, blueberries, corn, wine, poultry, and egg products, beef, pork, wheat, and so much more.
And U.S. Trade Ambassador Robert Lighthizer said because of the lowering or elimination of Japanese tariffs on many of these products,
we think we'll have substantial additional sales as a result of this.
Because the agreement puts U.S. farmers on an equal footing with other countries supplying Japan with ag products. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
The trade agreement between the U.S. and Japan is a positive step for agriculture. Michael Clements has more.
The announcement of a trade agreement between the U.S. and Japan means more market access for U.S. farmers and ranchers, according to the American Farm Bureau Federation. While the agreement itself is not yet finished enough to be signed, the U.S. and Japan Wednesday signed an intent to agree. Dave Salmonson, AFBF Senior Congressional Relations Director, says the agreement levels the playing field for U.S. ag exports into Japan.
For agriculture, the fact that the U.S. and Japan are signing a trade deal is a win, especially for our exports. We already sell about $13 billion a year to Japan in a variety of products, but we're fearful of seeing that erode if we don't have this trade deal.
The agreement lowers tariffs over time on U.S. agricultural products. Salmonson says exports to Japan may increase by $3 billion.
We will be even with our competitors, and we should see good increases in our beef competitiveness into Japan. Pork tariffs are going to go down, have more access for dairy, and our wheat producers were concerned about falling behind our competitors. So the fact that we'll be in there again with the same tariff as other countries should shore up what has always been a very good market for wheat into Japan.
Japan's legislative body must approve the agreement once finalized. Salmonson says farmers and ranchers may start benefiting from the agreement next year.
If the Japanese parliament does everything they need to do this fall, we could see this agreement go into effect on January 1st. And this will also be a really good signal for other countries we're negotiating with that the U.S. can close out trade agreements.
Michael Clements, Washington.
And with that wrapped up, administration officials, including the vice president, are pushing hard for congressional approval of the USMCA agreement.
The USMCA is what brought me here today. The largest trade deal in American history.
Vice President Mike Pence was at a Tyson's food plant in Nashville, Tennessee Monday, stumping for congressional ratification of the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement.
The USMCA is projected to add $68 billion to our economy and create 176,000 new jobs. It's also estimated the USMCA would increase annual American agricultural exports by $2.2 billion.
And with the Vice President, Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue, who earlier in the day told RFD-TV that as far as Congress approving USMCA,
I've been very optimistic about this getting done this fall.
He says there's wide support for it.
And I'm hoping we won't let this recent distractions politically interfere with doing the work of the people regarding these trade agreements. It's extremely important.
Late Monday, President Trump signed 2 trade agreements with Japan. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
With talks of the agreements on Capitol Hill, the U.S. continues to import more agricultural products than it exports.
A worrisome agricultural trade trend here in the last few months, with ag exports declining, ag imports rising.
For 4 of the last 5 months, we've had a negative trade balance.
Agriculture Department Trade Economist Cameron Doherty, we now have complete trade numbers for the first 11 months of the fiscal year from October through August. The August trade deficit was over $800 million alone, but Doherty says FY19 will still wind up with a trade surplus.
For the fiscal year, yes, we're still positive, and we still expect it to complete this year with a positive.
Of about $5.2 billion, but if you look at the calendar year, there's a chance, he says, we'll end up with an overall ag trade deficit. If that happens, it will be the first time in over 40 years. Back to the fiscal year, first 11 months, ag exports at $124.5 billion.
Down 6.5% from fiscal year 2018. Imports up 3%, and trade balance is down 81.5%.
Ouch. Exports down for corn, soybeans, and cotton, up for wheat. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
That's it for this week's podcast. You can drop us a line on Twitter or on Facebook and tell us what you thought of this week's program. For Steve Ritter, this is Jake Putnam and the voice of Idaho Agriculture.